Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 2005 sequel, but in all honesty, it's more of a soft reboot featuring these characters, the Devil's Rejects. Now, before I get to sharing my thoughts on this film, I want to give a very special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. If there's a particular film you would like to see me review or a topic you would like to hear me discuss, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description. Now, The Devil's Rejects is one of those films that got a lot of critical acclaim upon its release, and it's a movie that I've heard about, but I never really got around to seeing until fairly recently. I know it's a film that a lot of people consider to be Rob Zombie's masterpiece, so I honestly was a little bit hyped and a little bit pumped up to finally check this one out. And after seeing it, I gotta be honest, I was a little bit disappointed by this film. I'm not gonna say it was a massive disappointment, because at the end of the day, I still liked the film, but I didn't love The Devil's Rejects like a lot of other people do. And for me, I think it's because the way that it decided to tell its tale was not as satisfying for me and my personal tastes as it is for others. I personally felt the focus being on the Devil's Rejects, Otis, Baby, and Captain Spaulding, instead of the focus being on Sheriff Wydell, William Forsythe's character. I felt that with the focus being on the three outlaws, to me, that didn't really work that well. And I think it's because of how Rob Zombie decided to handle this overall focus when it comes to focusing the film on these three demented maniacs. And I know there's a lot of people who find them to be lovable. They love these characters. I never really felt that way. I didn't mind them. I liked them enough in House of a Thousand Corpses, but I didn't love all three enough to the point where I wanted to see a fairly straightforward, serious, gritty horror western featuring the three of them torturing and killing people in a hotel and then having shits and giggles and laughs about it. It's just one of those things where I guess I didn't find that to be that entertaining. And I guess that, the argument is, well, it's not supposed to be entertaining. But I don't know about that. Because there's a lot of scenes in this film where, they're smoking pot and they're having a laugh and they're, fucking around with each other. And, it's one of those things where it's like, it feels like a buddy movie, like a film dealing with, a bunch of ragtag outlaws who, are up to no good and they're on the lam from the law and they have done way more horrible things than any of the other, any of the Young Guns or any of these other outlaws that you've seen in Westerns. So to me, it's a very hard thing to actually make work. This whole merry band of outlaws sort of plot line and approach to these characters while they're like cutting people's faces off and raping people with guns and doing all kinds of fucked up shit. That's just me personally. It's one of those things where if you look at something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 or some of these other films that deal with these fucked up families who do fucked up things, a lot of the time they don't seem to have as many moments of self grandeur or self congratulation or glad handing, so to speak, about how awesome they are. They're painted in a way where, yeah, they're fucked up and they're crazy. and they are not martyrs. They're not people who you should be, rooting for. And I felt that the messages were a little mixed with this film. It's especially when you get to the ending of it. It seemed like it was trying to posit these characters as, characters who are anti-heroes instead of just being sadistic, crazy motherfuckers. And I don't think the anti-hero approach to these characters really was something that worked that well. But, it's one of those things. It's just the film is going to speak to people on different levels. I just wish that it focused on William Forsythe's character. I felt his character, his storyline, it was the strongest part of the film when it comes to its narrative. It's like the driving force of the movie. And I felt that it should have been the full focus. It should have had the film's full attention. Because I think that would have been more unique. How often do you see a storyline that's, in essence, a Western tale that focuses mainly on the guy who's hunting the outlaws down? There's so many films that focus on the outlaws and their exploits. Numerous films. But how many really are there that focus on the guy who's trying to catch them, the guy who's trying to take them down? And especially in the way that the film ultimately shows how far he's willing to go. When the tables are turned and the killers are now in the more sympathetic victim role. How often does that really happen in this kind of film and this kind of story? So I thought that was a huge missed opportunity. And I think the fact that it doesn't, focus more on William Forsythe's character, I think that is really one of the film's biggest faults for me in terms of how effective it is. So it's directed by Rob Zombie, and Rob Zombie, once again, does a really good job with his direction. He knows his way around a camera. He knows how to, definitely work within the realm of cinema in terms of having the camera have the right amount of movement and energy. He knows how to shoot a lot of different kinds of sequences equally as well. I think this is definitely his best film when it comes to his direction. It is, in a lot of ways, somewhat Tarantino-esque with some tracking shots, and there's a lot of ambitious stuff in this film from a directorial standpoint. And it's honestly a pretty impressive movie from a second-time director. This is his second film that he did. So I think I can see why a lot of people saw potential in Rob Zombie after this film, because the direction in this movie is honestly really quite fantastic in its own right. I just wish that he had another writer in that was there helping him really flesh out his ideas and his concepts. And also being that voice in his ear to say, hey, maybe you might want to tone down some of the dialogue. Maybe you might not want to have multiple lines of dialogue talking about fucking chickens. Maybe you might not want to go that route, because it's not really something that helps the film. So a lot of people have likened The Devil's Rejects to like something from Quentin Tarantino or Sam Peckinpah. And if you ask me, I 100% get that. And that's why Rob Zombie should have had another writer. I mean, can you imagine what this film could have been if Quentin Tarantino was a co-writer for this film? and Rob Zombie directed the movie, I think you really could have had a genuine classic, if that was the collaboration that was going on, if Quentin was willing to do that. Or maybe you could have someone that knows Quentin, who's familiar with Quentin's work, who had worked with Quentin, or maybe someone else, who has a similar sort of mindset or talent when it comes to writing words on a page. I don't feel that Rob Zombie is that talented of a screenwriter. He's a good idea man. He can come up with some really cool and fun concepts, but I don't think he's the best screenwriter. I don't think he did that great of a job in terms of giving this film the most compelling story it possibly could have had. I don't think that he did the best job with some of the dialogue. I know there are some memorable lines that people, throw out there, but when it comes to the humor, I didn't think it was nearly as funny from a dark comic perspective as House of a Thousand Corpses. I thought that film had more more lines of dialogue and more sequences that actually made me laugh. There were a lot of moments in this film that just made me cringe and roll my eyes and groan. Like, oh, hey, you look like you fucked some chickens. Like, I don't fuck chickens. Or the whole, like, oh, yeah, well, you could cut off a chicken's head and stick your dick in it and go, and then, hey, he looks like a chicken fucker. It's like, I don't fuck chickens. It's like, what the hell is this shit? Like, just stop. It's stupid. It's juvenile. It's lazy. It's uninspired. This is the kind of dialogue that an edgy fucking, teenager would come up with when they, first heard of and figured out how to swear. And I know I swear like a sailor in a lot of my videos and a lot of my rants, but I'm not putting that into a film that is trying to be like a Sam Peckinpah, Quentin Tarantino horror western. I'm not doing that. You just cheapen your film with lines of dialogue talking about chicken fucking. There's no need for it. So there's a lot of moments like that. And also Rob Zombie has this really bad habit of repeating lines of dialogue as if, if he repeats these lines enough times, they're funny, or they actually wind up working in some capacity. There's numerous scenes in this film that are like that in other films in his filmography. Baby will repeat some rhyme of hers like 50 times, and it didn't work that well the first time, but she's going to repeat it at least 3 or 4 times. Then you have a scene where Baby and Captain Spaulding are just saying Tutti Frutti over and over again. Tutti Frutti, Tutti Frutti, Tutti Frutti, Tutti Frutti. And I'm like Otis, who's sitting there in the car and is like, shut the fuck up. Like, I am totally in his corner, because it's like, yes, shut the fuck up. This shit is just fucking annoying. And speaking of annoying, I can't fucking stand Sheri Moon Zombie's character and performance as Baby Firefly. I can't fucking stand this character and this performance. I loathe it so much. It's so annoying. It's so irritating. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. It's like, sticking my dick in a fucking cheese grater. I really do not get why Rob Zombie thought that this character was so fucking awesome and good that she warranted so many scenes in this movie or in 3 from Hell. Maybe it's because she's his wife. Maybe it's a bunch of nepotism and ego. Because she can't fucking act, and this character is like a kid who's who's all hopped up on fucking Mountain Dew and a mountain of fucking pixie sticks, and won't sit still and won't shut the fuck up. And other characters like Captain Spaulding, he didn't really have that many scenes. And if you ask me, Sid Haig's character is the most interesting and the most likable character out of the three for me. Uh, Bill Moseley, he does a good job performance-wise, but the way that his character is written, it is like he's some invincible badass, and I just thought it was a really big stretch. Like, really? Bill Moseley? Is he some invincible badass who can take on anyone? I don't really buy it. Also, the way that he talks and the way that he carries himself is as if he's just fucking Charles Manson. You know, with the whole, oh, you know, the prison is in your mind, man. I am the devil. I am the Antichrist. You know, it's the same fucking shit. It's not even that original or that unique. At least when he played Chop Top, it was something different. Here, he's just doing his best Charles Manson impression. That's really what this character of Otis is, when you get right down to it. I mean, one of his lines of dialogue, where he talks about, you know, he is the devil, you know, that whole thing, that was actually a line from one of Manson's cult members. So, it's just, you know, if people love the character, cool. I never really fell in love with the character as much as other people did. I didn't find him as funny as other people did. It's just one of those things where I was pretty indifferent on the character. It's a good performance by Bill Moseley. He's doing the best he can with what he has to work with. But I never really fell in love with that character. I hate fucking Baby, and, you know, Captain Spaulding's the only one that I kind of like, and he's not even in the movie that much and doesn't have that many scenes. But I will give Rob Zombie credit for how he wrote the stuff with Sheriff Wydell, with William Forsythe, at least until the ending when he kind of fucked it up. But before all of that, I'll give him a lot of credit because I thought he did a good job really making that character so genuinely badass. Like, he's the only character in the film when I'm like, that's a badass. That's somebody who is a legitimate badass, who I could buy, someone being somebody that you did not on under any circumstances want to fuck with. He's the arm of justice. I bought that. So, and another reason for that definitely is because of William Forsythe's absolutely phenomenal and amazing performance. It's one of his best performances. He's so fucking good in this film. And he's one of the big reasons why I ultimately liked the movie, is because William Forsythe is so fucking compelling and so amazing and spectacular when it comes to his role in this movie. I just felt when it comes to the structure of the film, it starts off strong with a shootout at the Firefly house, and they escape, and there's some really nice bits of cinematography and direction. There's some good editing. That's another thing about this film. The editing is a massive improvement over House of Thousand Corpses. And it starts off promising, but then once they get to the hotel, I don't give a fuck. That scene goes on for way too long. That's what I'm talking about in terms of the self-congratulation, just glad handing of these characters and just being like how awesome and cool they are. And I'm like, can we get this scene over with already? I didn't think it was that scary. I honestly didn't think this film was that scary, period. I mean, this is barely even a horror movie. It's as if Rob Zombie wanted to distance himself as far as he possibly could from the horror roots of this franchise with this film. I get it. Dr. Satan was initially going to be in the film in a little scene with Rosario Dawson. but it was cut from the film because Rob Zombie felt like Dr. Satan didn't really fit in the approach that he was taking with this movie. And, he's right, because he didn't want to make a horror movie. So, yeah, it's not that scary. There's a lot of gags that are just repeated. Otis takes somebody's face off and puts it on his face. We already saw that done in House of a Thousand Corpses, and it was done, in my opinion, better in that film. This just seemed like it was only done for some extra gore and for a callback to House of a Thousand Corpses. Yeah, that scene went on forever. Didn't really give a shit about any of the hotel guests. Because I didn't even really get to know them that well. So that just went on forever in a day. And once you finally get to Sheriff Wydell and him cornering and hunting down the Devil's Rejects and getting the help of Danny Trejo and Diamond Dallas Page, who are playing these bounty hunters, the film then definitely picks up and definitely starts to become a hell of a lot more entertaining and interesting. And then you get to the finale that is genuinely crowd-pleasing for me, when William Forsythe is just fucking up these sadistic motherfuckers, give them a taste of their own medicine, showing them photos of their victims, stapling them to their chests, torturing, Otis by nailing, nails through his palms, and, just beating the crap out of him. And I was all for what Forsythe was doing. I know the film is trying to have this message of, anyone can be just as evil if they're pushed far enough. But I'm like, no, not in this case. The Firefly family have killed probably like hundreds of people. They've tortured and killed and mutilated and sexually molested and assaulted tons of people, alive and dead. These are some of the most brutal, twisted, fucked up people in all of cinema history. If you think about it, of all the things that they've done, all the acts of depravity and fucking murder and mayhem, no. There's no way that Sheriff Wydell, no matter what he fucking did to them, no matter how far he took it, there's no fucking way that he would have gone as far as they did previously. There's no way he would have been as evil as they were. There are different levels of evil. I don't think there's like just one level of evil that, is applicable to all evil acts. I think there's different levels of evil, and the fucking Devil's Rejects are off the fucking chart. They're off the scale when it comes to their acts of evil. I mean, what Wydell was doing is just giving them a taste of their own medicine. And it was honestly pretty, I'm not going to say lame, but it definitely was a lot more tame compared to what they were fucking doing to people. So no, I don't buy that. That whole moral or morality play or whatever the fuck it was trying to do with the film, and what critics point out. I don't think it's that effective. I don't think it works. Because look at what these motherfuckers did. Wydell was whipping baby Firefly a few times. Am I supposed to sympathize with baby Firefly? Why should I sympathize with baby Firefly? Just because, she's a human? She's not like most humans. She's pretty much a fucking devil, and she honestly loves it. She admits that. And so Rob Zombie, because he's so caught up in how awesome these characters are, doesn't have the balls to let Wydell win, let Wydell torture and kill them and bury them. Instead, he wants to give them a hero's death. He wants to give them a way for them to go out on their own terms in a blaze of glory, and goes in the most predictable route you possibly could take with this kind of film. I mean, they die at the end anyway. Well, I mean, if you count 3 from Hell, technically they don't, but that's a whole nother fucking story altogether. But if we're just looking at this as a standalone story and as a standalone narrative, technically they do die in the end. So why not let them fucking get a taste of their own medicine? Why not let them meet their demise at somebody who is just as sadistic and vicious as they are? They met their match. They met somebody who went that they pushed so far over the edge that he reached just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to their level of depravity and madness. Why not? You were gonna kill them all off anyway. And the way that it actually does go down, it just feels like it's just something that is not very satisfying. It just is incredibly disappointing to have all this build up and have this William Forsythe character who's, built up to be this badass who really is going to be somebody who can really take on the Firefly family, and he gets his neck snapped by Tiny, who decides to show up in the end to save his family in predictable fashion. He doesn't even die in like a badass way. He doesn't die guns a-blazing or any of that shit. He just gets his fucking neck snapped. It's pathetic. The way that his story ends is pathetic. After all that build-up, after all of that characterization and everything, he just dies like that? And then a few scenes later, the Firefly family get their hero moment, their hero denouement, where they bring out their guns in slow-mo and Freebird plays in the background, and they get gunned down by the cops who have set up a barricade. So in the end, they took him out. Yes, he did do some damage. I will admit that. Wydell did some damage to the Firefly family, more so than anyone else probably had ever done to them, but they still found a way to win in the end. And the only member of the family he really wound up killing was their mother. And to be honest, was one of the weaker characters in House of Thousand Corpses, and one of the weaker characters in this movie. He didn't even kill one of the main 3. Oh, and the older brother who got shot in the beginning, who had like next to no lines of dialogue and no reason to care about. The epitome of a cannon fodder character. There's no reason to really feel that much sympathy for him when he died in the opening shootout. So yeah, like the Devil's Rejects are painted and they're shown as being this group of badass, nearly indestructible motherfuckers, and after a while just gets old. When you have a movie where your main focus is just on what is essentially anti-hero worship, if you aren't really worshiping those anti-heroes, you're not really having as good of a time as you would if the film and its narrative had a different focus. So yeah, I know a lot of this review has been me just talking about the narrative and the story, but that's where most of my problems lie with this movie. Because when it comes to its direction, it's really good. When it comes to other technical aspects of this film, like the cinematography by Phil Parmet, it looks great. It really does have a really nice look to it when it comes to the way that the lighting is used, and it has this soft focus at times. It's just a really nice looking film. It really does capture that grindhouse 70s look and vibe that it's trying to go with, and it's trying to have. And for the most part, all the performances are great. They're really good. Sid Haig is good. Bill Moseley, even though I'm not that big on the character, still a good performance. I mean, Sheri Moon Zombie, she's the one that's not really that good at all. But William Forsythe is John Wydell. Some of the best work he's ever done. Ken Foree is fun as Charlie. Matthew McGrory plays Tiny. He's only in the film a little bit. This film was dedicated to him because he actually passed away, I think, soon after this film was finished. He did his job well enough. Leslie Easterbrook, there are some scenes where she manages to deliver the same kind of creepy vibe that Karen Black brought to the character. But then there's other scenes where it's just overacting and really, honestly, pretty laughable. The scene in prison is one of them, where she's supposed to be all crazy, and it's supposed to be like genuinely unsettling, but it's not unsettling in the slightest to me. It's just a fucking joke, and I think that's due to just how Rob just wasn't willing to rein her in. And there's a few other, actors and actresses, like Dave Sheridan, who plays an officer in the film, E.G. Daly, Geoffrey Lewis, Priscilla Barnes, Danny Trejo and Diamond Dallas Page, Michael Berryman, Deborah Van Valkenburg, PJ Souls, Tom Tolles, who has a cameo as the sheriff character from House of Thousand Corpses in a nightmare scene that his brother John has, and that was a really cool scene. And yeah, I mean, just who would have thought Diamond Dallas Page would pull off a role like this as well as he did? And the thing is, he was so good in this, I wanted to see more scenes with him. I wanted to see more stuff with the bounty hunters. They were underused and underutilized because the focus, the spotlight, pretty much everything when it comes to this movie, all the attention is given to the Devil's Rejects for the most part, and a little bit of it is given to Sheriff Wydell in sequences like the hilarious exchange between him and what is clearly a parody of film critic Gene Shalit, where he brought in this expert to figure out what the pseudonyms of this gang are, so that he can find them and find the the people that they utilize to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. And he finds out that it's a bunch of Marx Brothers names, so it brings in this film critic, and the film critic is saying all this useless film trivia, and he's not much of a help. And then he actually goes in and insults Elvis, and then fucking that just sends William Forsythe off the deep end and gets in his face and threatens him, and then at the end of it he's like, "Fuck Groucho." That's a hilarious scene. It's a great sequence. That's a scene that's actually funny. I didn't find lines like, "Oh man, I could still smell some of her pussy on my gun." I didn't really find that hilarious. Or, the chicken fucking scene. But, yeah, I mean, there are moments. This film does have moments that are genuinely marvelous and good, if not great. That's what makes the fact that the story is just not as satisfying as it could be because of its focus on this one thing when it should be focusing on something else. That's what makes it so disappointing. The score by Tyler Bates, I liked. It's not one of my favorite scores, but it worked. The editing by Glenn Garland, really good. I thought that was pretty impressive, genuinely excellent. The transitions were better. The use of like when the camera when the film stops and it's sort of like a still photo and then it transitions, were much more effective than they were in the previous film. And I mean, yeah, all the other technical merits from the practical effects when they are there. There's some wonky CGI fire in the end and some CGI gore that isn't really the best looking. But for the most part, I think Rob Zombie worked around his low budget pretty well when it comes to what he was trying to do visually with the film. And with the budget of $7 million, like I said, a good amount of it is on the screen, and it's not a film that really needed like the biggest budget in the world anyway, because it's trying to be more of a grindhouse sort of exploitation western with some horror elements. And it's like 109 minutes, and there's enough going on throughout that it does at least keep your interest. There are some moments where it kind of starts to lose you, like at least for me, with the hotel scene in particular. But it then picks up its pace and really starts to draw you in more when it starts to focus in more on Sheriff Wydell and his manhunt for the Devil's Rejects. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about the film other than, once again, I like the film, but I definitely don't love it. I probably would have really liked it if the focus was on Sheriff Wydell and he actually got to win in the end and took out the Devil's Rejects one by one, tortured them, killed them, and buried them, and sent them to hell once and for all. But instead, it doesn't go that route, so it's just not as satisfying for me. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the Devil's Rejects, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.